Okay, thank you. So my course is entitled and dedicated the Discreet Charm of Violence in Russian Literature. And it, it, it is mostly on the history of how the idea of violence appeared and, so to speak, stuck in modern Russian literature. We will investigate the key stages through which the idea developed from Pushkin to contemporary literature. It is impossible to confine this inquiry to the purely literary dimension, so we will also be venturing into adjacent fields such as history and philosophy, while centering, nevertheless, the formal means from which the idea of violence manifests in literature. That is the particular aesthetics in, in produces. The violence theme appeared in Russian literature as an extension of the idea of manifesting the historical determinism inherent to revolution. Paradoxically, the idea of violence found itself associated with the literary practices of movements conceived of as avant-garde or at least innovative among contemporaries. In the innovators, archaist innovator position, typically the idea of violence corresponded more to the later. This can readily be seen in the early Romantic work of Pushkin, in which the idea of revolutionary violence finds its most explicit expression in the era. Equally paradoxal is the combination of the idea of violence with the idea of compassion, as was the case with Radishev's work. Finally, both in Pushkin's writing and those of contemporaries, violence was associated with Napoleonism. Still, the Napoleonic theme was often considered as a case of the resistance of the part of the individual to fate, that is, to historical determinism. Pushkin's work is an exemplary illustration of how the idea of violence was overcome, how the idea as it developed lost its discreet charm. The work of Alexander Blok provided a different example, expressing the idea of the path идею пути in his work, which is initially be understood as the idea of the free will imperative to serving the beautiful lady, прекрасная дама. Blok eventually arrived to the idea of the terrible world and of such a world's righteous destruction, in which free will plays no role. Blok would aesthetically think of this world destruction in the 12th, which was received by contemporaries as a hymn to revolutionary violence. Pushkin and Blok represent two opposite dispositions toward the idea of violence in Russian literature, as well as two different paths in the consideration of this idea. For Dostoevsky, uh, like Pushkin, the sharp of violence fade away with time, though nevertheless Kirillov and Demons and Ivan Karamazov simultaneously rejected the idea of violence and the idea of new social orders founded on deterministic ideas. Thus, for Kirillov, the only possible form of rejecting violence is voluntary suicide. Moreover, Dostoevsky had intended to examine the idea of violence, um, of revolutionary violence, in a planned but ultimately unwritten novel about the Paris Commune, which was written or starting to be written in simultaneously with the beginning of his work on demons. A portion of the course will be specifically dedicated to the Russian literary appreciation of the Holocaust as a total expression of violence in the 20th century. Unfortunately, there are not many works dedicated to the Holocaust to Russian literature. There is, however, the important case of Vasily Grossman's life and fate, which not only describes the Holocaust, but also considers the Holocaust in light of the anti-Semitic waves that took place in the Soviet Union after the war. In this case, an appreciation of Holocaust and its violence receives a kind of typological consideration as universally maximal manifestation of violence. And finally, there is a separate lecture dedicated to the idea of violence in contemporary Russian literature, illustrated by the examples of so-called new drama, новая drama. The brightest example is Ivan Voropayev drama July, which Mark Lipovetsky defined as a performance of violence. So my course will consist from 5 lectures, and in short, the first is on Pushkin, Blok and Babel. The second one on violence as expression of the human will and the idea of Napoleonism. And in the center of consideration will be the question why Nietzsche is so beloved in Russia. The third lecture will be on resistance to violence as a form of rejection, the order of the world, suicide, and as its foundation. The special consideration will be on Tolstoy, non-resistance to evil by violence. So the first lecture will be on Holocaust, and the fifth one, will be on contemporary Russian literature on the stage as современная драма. Thank you.